A hardworking black farmer fights to save his family's land after a racist banker denies him a loan, threatening everything he's built. Just when hope seems lost, a heartfelt letter reaches President Jimmy Carter, sparking a powerful battle for justice that will leave you stunned. What happens next will restore your faith in resilience and fairness. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across the sprawling fields of Zeke Carter's farm. The rhythmic clink of tools echoed as Zeke tightened the bolts on an old tractor, its faded red paint a testament to decades of labor. Sweat beaded on his dark brow, and his rugged hands, calloused from years of work, moved with practiced precision. "Daddy, is it fixed yet?" piped up Thomas, Zeke's 10-year-old son, his wide eyes brimming with curiosity. "Almost, little man," Zeke replied with a smile, ruffling Thomas's tightly curled hair. "This old girl just needs a bit more care, and she'll be good as new." Martha, Zeke's wife, leaned against the porch railing, her warm gaze fixed on her husband and son. "Dinner's almost ready," she called, her voice carrying the softness of home. Beside her stood Lily, their teenage daughter, holding a basket of freshly picked vegetables. Zeke took a moment to look at his family, pride swelling in his chest. This farm wasn't just soil and crops, it was his family's lifeline, their future. But with each passing year, the equipment grew older, and the workload heavier. He dreamed of expanding the farm, of buying new tools and machinery that would make the land more productive, securing a better life for his children. In town at the First National Bank, Henry Whitman lounged in his spacious office. His polished desk gleamed under the sunlight streaming through the wide windows, and the faint scent of expensive cigars lingered in the air. Henry was a man of privilege and power, his sharp blue eyes scanning loan applications with an air of indifference. His tailored suit and gold watch spoke of his wealth, but his demeanor revealed a deep prejudice. For years, Henry had quietly denied loans to black farmers like Zeke, hiding behind excuses of risk and policy, while readily approving funds for less qualified white applicants. When Zeke's application crossed his desk, Henry's lip curled slightly. "Carter," he murmured, tapping his pen against the paper, "always thinks he can defy the odds." The town of Willow Creek, nestled in the rural South, was a place where traditions ran deep and change came slowly. Small farms dotted the landscape, their owners battling rising costs and shrinking profits. For black farmers like Zeke, the struggle was even greater, compounded by systemic barriers that stifled their progress. At the heart of the town stood the First National Bank, a towering symbol of power and control. It was here that Zeke found himself one bright morning, dressed in his Sunday best, his heart filled with cautious optimism. Zeke stepped into the bank, the faint scent of polished wood and ink greeting him. He adjusted his hat and approached the teller, a young woman who offered a polite smile but quickly averted her gaze. "I'm here to see Mr. Whitman about a loan," Zeke said firmly. Minutes later, he was ushered into Henry's office. The banker didn't rise to greet him, instead motioning lazily to the chair opposite his desk. "Carter," Henry said, his voice dripping with condescension, "what can I do for you?" Zeke cleared his throat, placing his application and supporting documents on the desk. "I'm looking to expand my farm, Mr. Whitman. I've got solid numbers here, good yields, a strong credit history. With this loan, I can buy the equipment I need to increase productivity." Henry leaned back in his chair, skimming the papers with disinterest. He muttered, occasionally making a show of flipping a page. Finally, he set the papers down and clasped his hands. "I'm afraid it's a no, Carter," Henry said, feigning regret. "Your operation, it's just too risky for us." "Risky?" Zeke asked, his voice steady but edged with disbelief. "I've been on that land for 20 years. Never missed a payment, not once. What's risky about that?" Henry's expression hardened. "It's not personal, Carter. It's just business. Maybe try again next year." Zeke clenched his fists under the desk, forcing himself to remain calm. He knew better than to argue outright, but the injustice of the situation burned in his chest. As he left the bank, the weight of the rejection settled over him. Outside, he paused on the steps, looking out at the bustling town. People passed by, some offering sympathetic glances, others avoiding eye contact altogether. Zeke straightened his shoulders and walked back to his truck, his resolve hardening with each step. this wasn't over. Zeke Carter tightened his grip on the envelope in his hand as he stepped back into the imposing First National Bank. The previous rejection lingered in his mind, but determination fueled his every step. He couldn't give up, not when so much depended on him securing the loan. When he reached Henry Whitman's office, the banker barely looked up, instead gesturing dismissively to the seat opposite his desk. "Back so soon?" Henry asked, his tone sharp with mock surprise. "I've brought more documentation," Zeke replied, placing the envelope on the desk. His voice was calm but firm. "You said my numbers weren't strong enough last time. Here's proof that my yields are steady, my payments on time, and my farm's value has increased." Henry opened the envelope lazily, flipping through the papers without interest. "Impressive," he muttered, though his tone betrayed no sincerity. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen on the desk. "But Carter, it's not just about the numbers, it's about trust. Loans are investments, and I have to feel confident about who I'm investing in." Zeke's jaw tightened. "You've approved loans for men who can't hold a candle to my track record," he said, his voice edged with frustration. Henry smirked, leaning forward. "Those men don't carry the same risks," he said, his words deliberate and biting. "I'm sure you understand." For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of Henry's thinly veiled prejudice pressing down on Zeke. He rose slowly, his eyes locking with the banker's. "Good day, Mr. Whitman," Zeke said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside him. Outside the bank, Zeke paused on the steps, the rejection still stinging. As he looked out over the town, he saw familiar faces, some nodding in quiet sympathy, others avoiding his gaze. A few openly smirked, their expressions smug. "Don't take it personally, Carter," said Earl, a white farmer passing by. "Whitman's just doing what he thinks is best. You know how things are." Zeke turned to him, his eyes steady. "Yeah, Earl, I know exactly how things are," he replied before walking away. At the general store later that day, whispers followed Zeke as he collected supplies. A few townsfolk offered polite but strained smiles, their discomfort evident. Others, like Jim Daniels, made no effort to hide their disdain. "Guess Whitman ain't handing out charity to just anyone," Jim muttered to a group of men at the counter, loud enough for Zeke to hear. Zeke ignored the comment, his focus unshaken. He had bigger battles to fight. That evening, Zeke returned home to find Martha sitting on the porch, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically. She looked up as he approached, her warm eyes immediately reading the frustration on his face. "No luck?" she asked softly. Zeke shook his head, sinking into the chair beside her. "I brought him everything. Proof, numbers, a solid plan. None of it mattered." Martha reached over, placing a hand on his. "He's trying to wear you down, Zeke. Don't let him." Inside, the sound of laughter filtered through the open door. Thomas and Lily were playing a game, their voices light and carefree. Zeke glanced toward them, his resolve hardening. "I won't let them take this from us," he said firmly. "Not for you, not for them." Later that night, as Zeke tucked Thomas into bed, the boy looked up at him with wide eyes. "Daddy, are we going to lose the farm?" he asked. Zeke's heart ached, but he forced a reassuring smile. "No, son. We're going to keep this land. I promise." After the children were asleep, Zeke sat at the kitchen table, a blank sheet of paper in front of him. Martha joined him, placing a cup of coffee by his side. "What are you doing?" she asked gently. "Writing a letter," Zeke replied, his pen poised. "If Whitman and this town won't help, then I'll take this higher. Someone out there has to care." Over the next hour, Zeke poured his heart onto the page, detailing his years of hard work, the discrimination he faced, and the injustice of being denied what he had rightfully earned. He addressed the letter directly to President Jimmy Carter, a man he'd always admired for his fairness and commitment to farmers. As he sealed the envelope, he looked at Martha, his expression resolute. "Do you think he'll read it?" she asked. "If he doesn't," Zeke said, "I'll write another. And another. I won't stop until someone listens." The following morning, as the sun rose over the fields, Zeke walked to the mailbox and placed the letter inside. The simple act felt monumental, a beacon of hope amidst the struggle. Back at the farmhouse, Martha watched from the porch, her heart swelling with pride. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Zeke's determination, she believed they could overcome anything. In the quiet hum of the Oval Office, A towering stack of letters waited on President Jimmy Carter's desk. Known for his hands-on approach, Carter made it a point to read personal letters from citizens, believing that leadership required understanding the struggles of everyday Americans. This morning, as sunlight filtered through the tall windows, his chief of staff, Sarah Newman, approached with a particular envelope. "Mr. President, I think you should see this," she said, placing the letter in front of him. Carter adjusted his glasses and began to read. The words, written in strong, deliberate handwriting, told the story of Ezekiel Carter, a hardworking black farmer from the South. Zeke's letter detailed decades of labor, the challenges of systemic racism, and his recent struggle with being denied a loan despite a flawless track record. Carter's brow furrowed as he finished the letter, the weight of Zeke's words settling heavily. "Sarah," he said, his voice resolute, "get my advisors. I want a full investigation into this." Within hours, Carter's team began gathering information. The president's agricultural advisor, Daniel Wright, led the charge, digging into the loan practices of First National Bank and its manager, Henry Whitman. Daniel's findings were damning. Over the years, Henry had denied dozens of loans to black farmers while approving requests from white farmers with weaker credit and inconsistent yields. Testimonies from other black farmers painted a clear picture of systemic bias. Zeke's impeccable financial history only made the injustice more glaring. During a briefing, Daniel presented the evidence to Carter, who sat at the head of the table, listening intently. "This isn't just about one man's struggle," Daniel said. "It's about a system that's stacked against people like him, and Henry Whitman's been exploiting that system for years." Carter nodded, his expression grim. "We're going to hold him accountable," he said. "This has to stop, not just for Zeke, but for every farmer who's been denied their fair chance." That evening, Zeke was sitting on his porch, staring out at the fields, when the phone rang. Martha answered, her voice cautious. "Mr. Carter?" she called, holding the phone toward her husband with wide eyes. "It's the president." Zeke rose slowly, taking the receiver in his hand. "This is Ezekiel Carter," he said, his voice steady despite the disbelief coursing through him. "Mr. Carter, this is Jimmy Carter," came the warm southern drawl on the other end. "I've read your letter, and I want you to know you're not alone in this fight. What's happening to you is wrong, and we're going to do something about it." For a moment, Zeke couldn't speak. The words he'd longed to hear, the promise of justice, felt almost surreal. "Thank you, Mr. President," he finally managed. "It means more than I can say." "We've already started investigating," Carter continued. "Your story's important, and I intend to make sure it's heard." As the call ended, Zeke sat in stunned silence, the weight of the moment sinking in. When he looked up at Martha, her eyes were glistening with tears of pride. True to his word, Carter took immediate action. The next day, he held a press conference, standing behind a podium adorned with the presidential seal. Cameras flashed as reporters leaned forward, notebooks ready. "Today, I want to address an issue that strikes at the heart of fairness and equality," Carter began, his voice steady and clear. "Ezekiel Carter is a hardworking farmer who has been unjustly denied the tools he needs to support his family and contribute to his community. This is not just a local issue, it is a national one. Discrimination in banking has no place in this country, and it must be confronted." The room erupted with questions, but Carter's words had already made their mark. News outlets across the country picked up the story, turning a spotlight on Zeke's case and the broader issue of systemic racism in lending practices. Back on the farm, Zeke sat in his living room with Martha and their children, watching Carter's press conference on their small television. As the president spoke about his case, Zeke felt a swell of pride and determination. "You see that?" Zeke said, his voice filled with emotion. "We've got people standing with us. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone who's been fighting this same fight." Martha placed a hand on his, her smile soft but unwavering. "You've done something incredible, Zeke. You didn't back down, and now the world is listening." For the first time in weeks, Zeke allowed himself to hope. The fight wasn't over, but now he wasn't fighting alone. The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered his ruling. Henry Whitman sat rigidly at the defendant's table, his face pale and drawn. The investigations, spearheaded by President Carter's administration, had unearthed damning evidence of discriminatory practices. Records showed a deliberate pattern of denying loans to black farmers while approving far riskier applications for white clients. Mr. Whitman, the judge declared, his voice firm, this court finds you guilty of discriminatory practices in violation of federal law. Your actions have undermined the trust and fairness that our financial institutions must uphold. Henry was fined heavily and forced to step down from his position. The bank itself was ordered to overhaul its policies, introducing new measures to ensure fair treatment for all farmers, regardless of race. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, their cameras flashing as Henry hurried to his car, avoiding questions. His once proud demeanor was gone, replaced by the quiet humiliation of a man who had been brought to justice. Back on Johnson Farm, the atmosphere was entirely different. A new tractor gleamed in the sunlight, its fresh paint a symbol of renewal. Zeke stood beside it, a smile of pride spreading across his face as he inspected the equipment. The loan, secured with the help of President Carter's intervention, had allowed him to purchase everything he needed to expand his farm. "Think she'll get the job done, Daddy?" Thomas asked, his eyes wide with excitement. "She sure will, son," Zeke replied, patting the hood of the tractor. "This is just the beginning." Later that day, the entire family gathered in the fields. Martha handed Lily a basket of seeds, and the two worked side by side, planting the first crops of the season. Zeke showed Thomas how to use the new equipment, the boy's laughter ringing out as he tried his hand at steering. The sight of his family working together, their joy unshaken despite the challenges they had faced, filled Zeke with a deep sense of gratitude. This land, this life, they had fought for it, and they had won. Word of Zeke's victory spread quickly through Willow Creek and beyond. His story became a beacon of hope, inspiring other farmers who had long suffered in silence to come forward. At the local church, a meeting was held to discuss how the community could support marginalized farmers. White and black residents sat side by side, many for the first time, sharing stories and ideas for change. "We've all seen what happens when we stay silent," said Reverend Jacobs, his voice resonating through the room. "It's time we stand together and demand what's right." Organizations began forming, advocating for fair treatment and resources for farmers who had been overlooked for too long. Zeke was invited to speak at several events, where he shared his journey and encouraged others to fight for justice. In a televised address from the Oval Office, President Jimmy Carter reflected on the broader implications of Zeke's story. "Ezekiel Carter is a testament to the resilience and determination of the American spirit," Carter said, his voice steady and resolute. "His courage in the face of injustice reminds us that fairness is not just an ideal, it is a responsibility we all share. Today we celebrate one man's victory, but let us not forget the work that remains. Discrimination has no place in our financial systems, our communities, or our hearts. Together we can build a nation where opportunity is not a privilege for some, but a right for all." The broadcast resonated deeply with viewers, sparking conversations about equity and accountability across the country. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the fields in a warm golden light, Zeke sat on the porch with Martha. Their children played nearby, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. "We did it," Zeke said, his voice soft but filled with pride. Martha placed her hand over his, her smile radiant. "You did it, Zeke. You never gave up." He looked out at the fields, now thriving with the promise of a bountiful harvest. "This isn't just for us," he said. "It's for everyone who comes after. We've shown them that change is possible." Ezekiel Carter's unwavering determination proved that justice can prevail, even against the odds. His story reminds us that courage and perseverance can inspire change, and fairness is worth fighting for. If Zeke's journey moved you, like this video to show your support, share it to spread the message, and subscribe for more powerful stories that ignite hope and drive action. Let us know in the comments how this story inspired you.